Hey everyone. I bet you guys didn't know that entrance was over there. There's actually like 6 entrances to this stage all over the place, and there's a maze that runs underneath, so you can kind of come up at any spot you want. I actually had to leave a bit of that, Kanuka bread? I broke it into some pieces and left a trail so I can find my way back out when I'm done. Yeah, so this is basically the coolest stage I've ever been on before. I've been a developer for about 8 years and giving talks for about that long, and this is definitely the coolest stage. So I'm Leah. I currently am a developer advocate at Dropbox, which means that I come and speak to lovely folks like you guys about Dropbox APIs and what we're working on at Dropbox. And I'll try and make my talk not too corporate-y today, but more of sort of what we're thinking about at Dropbox in terms of APIs and what we've been working on. So I do have a background as a developer. Prior to Dropbox, I was doing iOS development, so mobile development, and before that, doing Python development. So enough about me. I'll talk about Dropbox a little bit. So are you all familiar with Dropbox? Everyone here sort of know what Dropbox is? Okay, cool. So I'll just give a little bit of background. But anyways, the concept behind Dropbox is your digital stuff everywhere. And the idea is that you can take your files with you wherever you go. This is actually a screenshot of my Dropbox. Don't look too closely inside of it. But this is a screenshot of my photos directory. And all of my files here are synced to Dropbox and backed up in the cloud. And this means that, you know, I can sync between multiple computers. If something happens to one of my devices, I still have all my files. It's really nice. So this is the concept behind Dropbox, your digital stuff everywhere. All right. I'm gonna keep moving around this stage so that if you're like taking photos or whatever, you can like post them to Twitter and no one will know where I actually was standing for my talk. That'll be very confusing. I don't know how good of an idea that is. All right, I'll stand up here for this one. Okay, so basically when I talk about Dropbox and when we think about Dropbox, we think about files. So we associate Dropbox with files and file storage. And this was great until things like smartphones and tablets came along. And then at Dropbox, we had to start thinking not only about files, but about data, because as you can see, or as you know by using devices, they don't all necessarily have a file system in this traditional sense. And they don't necessarily have like a finder and a thing to browse your files. So we've been thinking a lot about data too. So I'm going to talk about our APIs from Dropbox, and I'm going to talk about them in sort of 2 categories, files and data. So we'll start with files, because that's how people think of Dropbox. That's how we all think about Dropbox. And Dropbox actually has 3 APIs for files with a little bit of different purposes. So the first one I'm going to talk about is drop-ins, which are very simple, easy-to-use APIs. They're only a couple lines of code. And I'm going to actually spend most of my talk on drop-ins because they're particularly applicable to JavaScript. They're all JavaScript-based, and they're very easy to use. There are some drop-ins for mobile apps as well, but I'm probably not going to talk about those today, even though I love mobile apps. Oh, and then the second API I'm going to talk about is the core API, which is more powerful than drop-ins, and this is what you think of as like the typical Dropbox API. And the third file API is the sync API, and that's mostly for mobile applications, so I won't be talking about that one at all. I'll skip over that. So first thing I want to talk about is the Dropbox drop-ins. And these are simple ways to integrate Dropbox in just a few lines of code. Now there's 2 things that developers most often want to do with Dropbox and in ways they want to integrate their app with Dropbox. And those are, they want to be able to have their user choose a file from Dropbox, and they want their user to be able to save a file to their Dropbox. So the chooser allows you, obviously, like its name implies, choose a file from Dropbox. And we have SDKs for JavaScript, iOS, and Android for the chooser. And for the saver, we currently only have a JavaScript SDK for the saver. So I'll show you kind of what those look like. So here's just the snippet of code to import the drop-ins library. It's a simple JavaScript import, and this will cover both the chooser and saver. So you could use the same, you could have them both in the same website. So it's just a simple JavaScript import. And you just have to supply your app key. So you need to register an application and supply an app key for your app. But it's very quick to get started. The whole thing takes maybe about 5 minutes. And I'm going to demo for you what the chooser looks like. I'll just show you really quickly. It'll be a lot easier to understand, I think. So here, this is actually the Dropbox website tutorial for installing the chooser, but I'm using it because it actually has like a very nice, simple choose from Dropbox button. So this is what it looks like. You can put this button anywhere on your site, and you have some options you can choose with it as well. So I'm actually going to do a direct link because that sounds like fun. But then when the user clicks this button, they get taken to their Dropbox, and they can choose a file. I'm going to choose this awesome cupcake. Cool. And then here's what I got back from the Dropbox API. Very simple. It's just a... Oh, the internet's slow. Just a cupcake. Cool. All right. I'll skip over that. Okay, so here's what the code looks like that I used for that chooser, or that I would use if it wasn't just the tutorial Dropbox page. So I'm creating a button with Dropbox create chooser button, and I can supply some options, and then I just attach it anywhere in the DOM. And here are the options that you get with the chooser. It's very simple. You get a success callback, a cancel callback. You can choose the link type, which is preview, which is our Dropbox sort of nice preview page, or direct, which lets you download the file directly. And then multi-select is the option to either let users only choose one file or allow them to choose multiple files. And then you can also specify only allow users to choose this type of extension. For example, you may only want to use photo extensions because you need, for some reason, a photo in your application. And then the result that you get back is a file or a list of files with a file name, a link, a size, an icon, which is like the file icon, and then a thumbnail link. And with this thumbnail link, you can kind of modify that URL to get different sizes of thumbnails as well, and that applies to photos and videos. So that's sort of the chooser, really, really basic, really simple. I just wanted to show it to you guys. It's one of our most popular JavaScript APIs for Dropbox. As you can see, it's just a simple way to say, hey, I need this file, or let a user choose this file from Dropbox. So I'll show you guys the saver next, which is the sort of equivalent, but in the other direction. So the ability to save to Dropbox. Again, I'm just going to show you this from the tutorial website. I definitely recommend just checking that out. It's got some good demos. So here I clicked on my save button. I'll do that again. Cancel. Save to Dropbox. And then I can choose where I want to save it. I know maybe I want to choose a different location. Oh, this is making me sign in. Forget that. I'll just save it to the default location in my Dropbox. Okay, and now it's saved. Now I got a little green check mark here. Let's see. It's saved to my saves, and there it is. Cool. Awesome. So that is also a very simple API. Nice. Okay, so there's the saver. We'll look at the code for doing that, and this one's actually much easier. You can actually just use the saver by specifying a link in your application and a link to the file. So you provide the link is a link to the file, and by setting the class Dropbox Saver, Dropbox will do all this work for you to make that little button, and everything will just work. It's pretty crazy. It's just one line to implement the saver. Well, two if you count the JavaScript import that I showed you earlier. And then you do have the option to create the saver programmatically as well, same as the chooser. This should look very familiar. It's the same code. Dropbox create save button instead of create choose button, and attach it to the DOM. And this will take some options as well. Options for the saver include the files you want to save, and you can specify up to 100 files that you want to save. You probably don't need that many, or don't want to be saving that many out to a user's Dropbox, but you can specify a lot. Plus the callbacks for success, cancel, and error. Not too interesting, but this one's kind of fun. There's also a progress callback that gets called periodically, and it'll give you a value between 0 and 1. So if you want to display a progress bar or some indication of how long it's taking to save those files to the user's Dropbox, you can do so. One really cool thing about the saver is that files are cached on Dropbox's side. So they're super fast for users to save into their Dropbox. Dropbox only gets the unique file from you once. So it downloads the file once to Dropbox, and then it uses HTTP headers to determine freshness. So if you do want to change that file in the future, you can you can use headers to sort of time it out. So that's the saver. These are the drop-ins. Supported browsers, every sort of major browser it works on, and once it doesn't, it falls back very nicely. So yeah, those are the very simplest APIs that Dropbox has. So I'll talk now about a little more powerful API, which is the core API for Dropbox. Now this was the first API ever written. I'm gonna come over here now. I need to get more exercise. Okay, all the way up here. All right. Core API was Dropbox's first API. It's sort of what you'd think of as a typical, I'm gonna pull this away from my mouth a little bit. Typical HTTP REST-ish API. So it's the HTTP API for files. It is REST-ish, uses OAuth 2, and has JSON responses. So it's kind of what you'd expect of an API. Has SDKs, official SDKs for Python, Ruby, PHP, mobile, and community-supported libraries for JavaScript, C#, Perl, and more. There's actually several libraries for JavaScript, and some are more focused on client side, and some are more focused on server side, like Node.js. So recommend checking those out. And so the core, like I said, the core API does sort of what you'd expect it to do with Dropbox. So you want to maybe list your files, upload a file, get a thumbnail of an image, or share via a link, and these are the paths for each one. I'm just showing you like the URLs to do that. So there is just the core API just has like an HTTP API, and then there's libraries built on top of that. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the core API because files are great, but what I really wanted to talk to you guys about today, and the thing that I'm really interested in for the future of Dropbox is, so what now? So we have a file API, it works great, we've got these really easy drop-ins, but sort of, what are we working on these days? So the main thing that we've been working on at Dropbox and on the API team is this data store API. And data store meaning structured data, not just files. So it's kind of scandalous to think about Dropbox being anything other than files, but we realized that our developers wanted to store more than just flat files. They were actually using Dropbox to store data. Does anybody here use an app called 1Password? Heard of 1Password? Okay, if you're not using 1Password or a similar app like LastPass, you may want to consider it for your password management needs. But other than that, 1Password does have this nice feature, sync to Dropbox. Does anybody use the sync to Dropbox feature? Yeah, it's really nice, right? So you're able to sync your passwords across devices. So you have your passwords on your phone, you have them on your different computers, and they're all synced via Dropbox. So we were seeing developers do this already, right? They're like, oh, we want to be able to sync our data between devices. So we built this data store API, which just launched in the spring of last year, brand new API, and it basically is like a NoSQL database. There are SDKs available. It's mostly targeted towards mobile applications, but there's also a really awesome JavaScript API so that you can build an application for mobile and also have a desktop application and have them all working using data stores as sort of the back-end storage for the app. And what's kind of unique about it is that it's the data is stored in the user's Dropbox, and there is no like developer quota or developer limits on what you can store. It basically is sort of split up and saved in the user side, and so this API is completely free for developers, pretty much completely free for users as well. So, yeah, so what does the data store API look like? When I talk about a NoSQL database, this should actually look very familiar to you guys. Used databases before. So the data store API has an account. An account can have a data store or multiple data stores. And within the data stores, you'll have a table, and tables will have records with fields and values. I should note about the data store API that you do get notifications of changes and updates in real time. So it uses long polling. So the JavaScript API will use long polling to get updates of that happen to your data in the background. And then I say we just are working on this now. We actually launched the feature yesterday and announced the ability to share. So when I said the data store in the user's own database or in the user's own Dropbox, now you have the ability to share data between users. And this opens up a whole new category of applications. You can now make social applications sharing data on Dropbox, which is kind of, historically you've always been able to share folders on Dropbox, but now the ability to share data as well. So, okay, I actually have to go back here. I'll show you a quick demo of an app that uses data stores. And this is kind of different. You can keep in mind that this is all backed by Dropbox, or the whole back end is in Dropbox. There's no hidden server-side components to this at all. So this is our demo application that we built. Here, I'm going to hide this away, a little less distracting. Okay, cool. So this is our demo application, Lists, and it's basically an app for making lists. Now you could think of this as like to-do lists, but I like listing about food because I like food. So I made a list of burgers, made a list of pizza. I can make a new list. Actually, I'll make this like a grocery list. Okay, cool. So I have my new grocery list, and I can add items. This is all backed by Dropbox data stores. There's no server-side component to this at all. Let's do some eggs, milk, bread, and maybe I need to pick up some cat litter. Cool. All right. Maybe I don't want bread. So each of these lists is a data store, and I want to be able to share this data store. So maybe I want to share my grocery list with someone who will help me fetch my groceries. Maybe I'm going to like send it to my mom or something and have her pick them up. So I can click this share, and I can actually choose to share it. And the sharing settings are either public, or I'm actually on a Dropbox, or I have a corporate Dropbox account. I have a Dropbox for Business account. It actually is called Dropbox, which is very confusing. I have a Dropbox called Dropbox because I work at Dropbox. But this would say like your company's name. If it was not Dropbox, it was something else. So I can scope my permissions to either anyone with this URL can be a viewer and editor, or anyone on my team with this URL can be a viewer editor. So I'll just say anyone can view this grocery list. And then I can share it in the web by copying the URL. So let's say I have, okay, so this is a different user. I'm logged in with a different account here, and let's say I go to this URL. There we go. Now it's shared. So now I have the two lists. One is one here, and since it's not editable, it's just view only here. Here it is here, and so maybe I'll add a new item. Maybe I do want bread. You can see it updates in real time too, so I'll do that again. Beer. Need beer. Beer. So as you can see, updates in real time. You can share data stores. Pretty cool API. It's great for if you're working with a static website without wanting to build like a server-side component. It's also great for mobile applications if you want to have like a web side of that as well. It's the same API. So that's the data store API. Here we go. Okay, so we'll take a little bit of a look at the code. I'll go through this pretty quickly. So here's the setup for setting up data stores in JavaScript. The main object you're going to work with is the client, and you'll want to create a new Dropbox client and supply your app key. You'll need to register for an application on the Dropbox website. And then you'll call this authenticate method, and this will do the whole pop-up login to Dropbox. And then it has a callback, which I've called update authentication status. And then in update authentication status, I create a data store manager. And this is the data store manager is the main object that's responsible for creating data stores, opening existing data stores, and deleting data stores, amongst other actions that you might want to do on your data stores. So every time I'm making a new list, I'm calling this data store manager create data store. When I shared a list and opened it on the other browser, I was calling open data store. And I can also delete data store, so I can go back and delete any of my lists. So these are just sort of the basic functions. There's more. I'm just kind of covering these briefly. But this is another cool part of the data store API, is to add listeners to different events. So for this particular application, the list ones that I showed you, the event that I'm listening for is any data store changed, which is data store list change. And then I added a listener on that. And then I can get all the info about the data stores within there. Another one that you may be interested in is listening for any time records have changed. So that's how you attach listeners. All the code for this sample app is online on GitHub, so I recommend checking it out. It's a pretty cool example, and there's also a version for iOS and a version for Android, all the same applications, so you can kind of run them and test them out. Okay, there's the GitHub source code. All right, so I'm actually done really early today. You guys are talking so fast. Must be because it's like 5:30 in the morning in San Francisco. I'm not quite all there yet. Yeah, I flew in from San Francisco the day before yesterday. So I landed yesterday here in Stockholm, and to get here, I left Tuesday night and I flew over the top of the globe. I didn't know you could actually like go over like Greenland, and so it was a 10-hour flight, but it seemed shorter than my normal trips to Europe, which I went like sort of around the globe. And then I started wondering, why doesn't everyone just go over the top of the globe? I don't know. It's pretty crazy. I guess I had never like wrapped my mind around, okay, you guys don't think it's that crazy, but I thought it was pretty, you're like just sitting there really kind of passive. And I went over the top of the globe yesterday. It's kind of mind-blowing. I was like over the North Pole, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. We're near there all the time. We just hang out here. I thought it was pretty cool. So those are the Dropbox APIs for JavaScript. I covered the drop-ins, talked briefly about the core API, and then talked about the data store API, and then talked about my flight over the top of the globe, which I thought was really cool. I was actually surprised at how nice and warm it is here this time of year. I expected it to be really cold, but I got in and like the sun was glaring in my eyes, and it was like the middle of the night my time, and I was like, what's going on? But really beautiful. So I've really enjoyed it so far being here. So thanks so much for having me. And I was really happy to talk to you guys about Dropbox and sort of what we're working on. Feel free to come up to me afterwards if you have any questions about sort of what Dropbox is doing in terms of APIs, or just want to talk JavaScript, or just sort of want to chat about anything. I'll be around tonight as well, and tomorrow for the whole conference. So I'm pretty excited to get to check out more of Stockholm. Let's see, do I have any more slides? Oh yeah, and if you want more information about our APIs, just check out dropbox.com/developers. It's actually most of the stuff I've talked about is in there. Our blog is /developer/blog, in which you'll see all our announcements about our new features, all the stuff that we launched yesterday. I mentioned data store sharing as the biggest thing that we launched yesterday. We also launched webhooks for data stores. So we have file webhooks, but we just recently added webhooks for data stores as well, which is great if you're building a server-side application. You can get notified every time a user's files change or their data stores change. Pretty cool that we support webhooks now. What was the one other one? Oh, and local data stores was a new feature we added. We had it in a sort of a beta testing mode for a while and just launched it yesterday. Local data stores is for mobile applications, so Android, iOS, and OS X as well. The ability to let users use data stores without having to log into Dropbox first. I didn't show it, but in the demos on the web, you need to like log into Dropbox with your Dropbox account before you can start using data stores. Mobile applications now support the ability to start working with the data store database style API right away, and then allow your users to say, oh, would you like to log into Dropbox, sync your data across devices at any point in your application. So those were the big announcements from yesterday. So pretty excited that Dropbox is working hard on our APIs. We're investing quite a bit in data stores, and I hope you like it. So thank you guys for having me.